It is time for the state of California to secede from the United States. That's my argument that I'm going to make in this video. So, I did a little research on the legalities of it, some research on economies involved, what the arguments are in favor, arguments against, what the consequences would be both for California and for the United States if California seceded from the United States. So let's dive in. First, there is no legal pathway for California to secede from the United States. Fortunately, we are no longer a nation of laws, is my argument. Look at our president. Look at the Republican Party. Laws, we've hit a point where Democrats and people on the left are the only ones who are still playing by the rules. The executive branch is not. The legislative branch has ceded all of its power to the executive branch. The judicial branch, the lower courts and the appellate courts are doing their jobs. The Supreme Court is like, fuck it, he can do whatever he wants, effectively ceding their power to the executive branch. Under current U.S. laws and the Constitution, there is no legal mechanism provided for a state to leave the United States. And in fact, California state constitution doesn't provide for that either. And there was a Supreme Court case in 1869, Texas v. White, affirming that states cannot unilaterally secede from the United States. It would require a constitutional amendment, be ratified or affirmed by 2/3 of the Congress, ratified by 3/4 of the state or of the states. But again, it's like, that's if you're going to do it legally. How does that even matter at this point? I would also note that there are about 4.5 million adults in California who legally own firearms. It's about 15% of our population. And there are roughly 2 million active duty members of the United States military across all branches. We have double that. So there's that too. There was a proposed ballot initiative. Well, there is a proposed ballot initiative that's going to be on the ballot in 2028, asking if California should become an independent country. It doesn't really have any teeth to it. But, California is the 4th largest economy on the planet. That works in our favor. Political and cultural differences with the current administration and what the current administration is intentionally doing to California warrant secession, because that's not going to stop. 30% of Californians support the idea of seceding from the United States. Almost 1/3. And we already currently pay $80 billion more in federal taxes than we receive from the federal government in return in the form of services or whatever. So if we secede, we'd save ourselves $80 billion. Counter arguments: it's not legal, would face insurmountable legal and constitutional barriers. And there are a lot of arguments that be like, theoretically California could do this, and we would immediately become a global economic power. We would be in the G8, we just would be behind the United States, China, and Canada. I don't know. So we would become an immediate global economic force. We would have fiscal autonomy. We could control the policies. And here's one downside. The one thing I don't like about this is that the California governor, the House Assembly, and the Senate, it's all Democrat supermajorities. And single party rule, while it has benefited California economically, Democrats are a pain in the ass, man. They just are. I'm not super excited about single party rule. There would also be tremendous trade disruptions. We'd have to establish trade relationships with all of our new trading partners. What would our currency be? What would our financial system be? We would have to have our own Department of Defense. We'd have to have a national defense for the state of California. I don't think anybody really knows how the politics of it would work out. Certainly, Donald Trump would take vengeance on any country that entered into trade agreements with the nation of California. So that would be tricky. So there are a lot of risks. So how would the United States be affected if California seceded? The state of California is responsible for 15% of the United States annual GDP. We contribute $4 trillion to a total of $27.7 trillion in economic output for the United States. That would be an absolutely massive loss. For a country to lose 15% of its annual GDP like that would be staggering. It would be staggering. The federal government, the current United States federal government would lose, I think we contribute around $500 or $600 billion a year to the federal budget. It would jack up all the trade stuff. There would be political consequences. And then there's potential for a domino effect of other blue states seeing us do that and saying, oh, we're dipping out too. And so there could be a little bit of a domino effect. And so, it's like California is 15% of the current United States GDP. The next highest state is New York at 8.1%, almost half of what California does. And then Florida comes in at 5.5%, contributing to GDP. And then, so it's like the last thing, because I've seen a lot of people talking about this, we should just stop paying our taxes. Well, how are your taxes paid? They're paid through withholding from your paychecks if you are a W-2 employee, as the vast majority of Americans are. Those are withheld and paid by your employer. Does anybody have an employer who would be willing to stop doing that on your behalf and get in trouble with the IRS on your behalf? Doubtful. But me being a trial attorney, I had a buddy a few years ago who worked for a firm that I worked for, but he and his wife, who was also an attorney, they had formed an S corporation. And so he had our bookkeeping department at that firm issue the gross amount of his pay twice a month payable to the S corporation. And that S corporation, which was controlled by he and his wife, was the entity that was responsible for paying their withholding, their taxes. And the S corporation did that on a quarterly basis. So technically, they were self-employed. That is not legal advice. That is not accounting advice. But I'm just saying, that's something that I saw somebody come up with that certainly seems like it would be applicable in this kind of situation. Talk to a lawyer and talk to an accounting professional before you do anything stupid. That'll get you in trouble with Donald Trump's IRS.